Hi, everybody. I'm just going to give a couple seconds to make sure that the feed is going through. If you can see and hear me, hopefully, give me a shout out in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. I assume most people would be watching from the Madison, Indiana, Hanover, Indiana area, Jefferson County, Indiana. But you never know. You never know with the magic of Facebook, do you? So I'll go ahead and get started. And yes, hello, Anne. I'm glad when I'm speaking to no one at all, it's very helpful to see that someone is actually out there. It's all working. Our dastardly plans are all working. Excellent. So thank you. Just a few things to get through. So wanted to say that this talk with a Eugene and Marilyn Glick Indiana Authors Award honoree, me, is part of the Novel Conversations Speakers Program sponsored by the Indiana Humanities with support from Glick Philanthropies. The Indiana Authors Award recognizes contributions of Hoosier authors to the literary landscape in Indiana and across the nation. There are many of us. Funded by Glick Philanthropies, its goal is to elevate the written arts in Indiana, inspiring Hoosiers' love of reading and drawing greater attention to homegrown literary achievement. And I love that as an intro to me because I think it's absolutely true in this instance. So I am Lori Rader-Day. I am homegrown Indiana. I was born in Boone County, Indiana. I went to school at a place called Western Boone, senior high school, from 7th grade until graduation. It was a very small school. It's still a very small school. It's surrounded by cornfields, like just highway cornfields. There's a cemetery, I think, all breeding grounds for the imagination of a crime writer. And I went to Ball State University. I went there twice, as a matter of fact. I have 2 degrees from Ball State in journalism. And I'm a proud Hoosier writer. I live in Chicago now. You're going to have to forgive me for that. Circumstances, that's just how it went down. But and Chicago's a great place to be a writer as well. But I find that because I'm no longer in Indiana, sometimes that's what I want to talk about. I've been in Chicago about 20 years. And so I'm just now willing to talk about Chicago as though I live here. But I can't say that I'm from here. I can never say that I am from Chicago. It's not true. So I often write about Indiana in my stories. So before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that Village Lights Bookstore in Madison has been very helpful and has brought in some of my books so that you can stop by there or give them a call and order a copy of them. I sent signed book plates. So if you buy the book from Nathan at Village Lights, hi Nathan, you can get a signed copy of one of my books, even though I'm not in Madison. If you want it personalized, if you want it to say, to my very best friend from Lori, you can request a special personalization and I will sign the book plate specifically for you and we'll ship it to you. So let Nathan know. You can give him a call at 812-265-1800, or you can look up Village Lights. I'm sure you're very familiar with the bookstore. I have not had the chance to be down there. I would love to visit the store. Nathan and I are old friends. So, writing. So I usually start by talking about things which I think are very near and dear to the hearts of the people who have brought me here and the people who might be watching. I am a writer today because I was a reader first. My mom used to walk me and my sister to the library, uphill both ways, as the story goes, right? And we would come back with, stacks of kids' books and spend all week reading them. Um, I was a huge fan of my library, and early on, I was a huge fan of these books about a girl named Ramona Quimby. I was a huge fan of these books, and like 6 years old, maybe 7, and I adored them. And one day I realized there was a name on the cover of the book that was not Ramona's name. It was this Beverly Cleary person. Now, who is this? What is her name doing on this book, do you think? And I realized, okay, this is the lady that writes these, that makes these stories possible. And it was a revelation to me that there were people who were writing these stories that I loved so much. And I was a people. So maybe I'll give it a shot. And so my very first creative act was one of theft. They call it fan fiction now, but I decided to write my very own Ramona Quimby story. I did not get very far. I don't think I got more than a few sentences, but I do remember being just amazed that I could put words down on the paper. My hand was putting the words down on the paper, and they were creating, not a good one, but a Ramona Quimby story. I loved those books. Elizabeth said she loved us too. And of course, we just lost Beverly like last week, 104. I did hold out hope that I would get to meet her. I've met so many of my literary heroes over the last few years, but there was just no way to make it work with Beverly. I'm sorry to say. But so I wrote all through childhood. One of the things I always did is I always sort of took notes. If you're getting like a Harriet the Spy feel about things, it was not unlike that, actually. You couldn't trust me. I would take notes about the things that happened in my family, and then I would sort of tell that story, write it down, sometimes with pictures. I was a big artist when I was a kid too. And that became like a thing that my grandmother especially she knew that I would do this. So when we would get to wherever we were going, a family reunion, I remember specifically in Ohio, she would say, "Okay, Lori, where's your story?" And then she would get like all these little jokes, these little things that had happened along the way. And I just thought it was so amazing of her to care what I thought had happened. And I'm sure I was wrong about a lot of stuff. But that was the early encouragement. My mom taking me to the library. My dad was very supportive of, just whatever we were up to. And, my grandma saying, "Yeah, tell your version of the story. I was there, but I would like to hear your version of the story." So lots of support early on. I wrote off and on, and just, the way that we do as kids, we dabble in a lot of stuff. When I was in high school, my high school had a creative writing club, and that was very exciting. I didn't realize that there was such a thing, and then we had one, and we had a contest every year. So in my first year in the creative writing club, I won the short story contest, which is, kind of a big deal at the time. Amazing to me, and I beat the senior boy. I was a sophomore, who had been winning sort of every year. And that's not a great way to make friends, but it was a moment important for my career later. His name is Chris, so just put a little pin in the name Chris, and I'll tell you what happens with him. So wrote in high school, wrote in college, actually wrote quite a bit in college because I had written a short story that featured one of my friends. Like I sort of like made a character much like one of my friends and put that in the story. But all my other friends, when they read it, they recognized that I had used a friend in the story, and they were eager to have their own short story written. So suddenly I had an audience, and I had sort of a deadline because they all wanted to have a short story. They were sort of like, "Why are you watching TV?" or "Why are you playing cards? We want you to be writing." So I had this sense of urgency to create all of this. I actually did quite a bit, which is interesting. But then, I graduated, life gets in the way, work, jobs, life. And I just went back to dabbling for quite a while. And And in fact, one of the first things I did, where I thought, okay, I'm getting maybe a little serious about this is, I went back to graduate school for my second degree from Ball State. Yay, Ball State chirp. For journalism. It was journalism undergrad and then a master's in journalism. But I also got to go to a conference called the Midwest Writers Workshop, which, if you're not familiar, you're in Indiana, look it up. It's not that far to drive up to Muncie and spend a weekend there in the summer when they do their in-person conference. I can't remember if it's in person this summer, if it's virtual, maybe a combo. It's a great resource if you're interested in any kind of writing. They have classes on any kind of writing. But I got a chance to go there, but it just wasn't clicking. Life got in the way. So I moved to Chicago, worked. I had a writing job. I wrote some very excellent articles on healthcare. You wouldn't have seen it. You wouldn't have seen them anywhere. But the problem was that I was writing for my job, but I was not writing for myself. And in fact, 5 years passed between any sort of writing for myself. And the reason that things changed is because one day my friend Chris from high school emails me and says, my book is getting published. And I was so excited for him, but also so envious, because he had gone and done this thing that we had just sort of played with. I thought we were just playing with this idea of being a writer, right? And he's out there doing it. Now, he had centered his life around writing in a way that I had not. I had a writing job, but it was keeping me from creative writing. It wasn't helping me. And he had gone much more directly, doing an MFA program in creative writing, working at a bookstore, really, enveloping himself in that life. But his publication spurred me to get my act together. And really what I thought was, first of all, what I thought is, what I was surprised by is that people from Indiana were allowed to publish books. You know what I mean? As a kid, writing, it was just a fun thing. Even if you're very good at it, it's just a fun thing. I did not see a lot of books by Indiana authors. I did not read a lot of stories that happened in Indiana. And so it came as a rather big surprise to me that we were allowed to publish books. Now, my friend, before I get too far and forget to say this, my friend from high school is Christopher Koch, Coake. He is also a former winner of the Indiana Authors Award and a fantastic writer. He has a new book of short stories out called You Would Have Told Me Not To. So check him out. He's the real deal. I mean, he's the real deal. And my total and seething green envy of his life got me back into writing. So thank you, Chris. So what did I do when I was so envious, and I actually went down to the Barnes and Noble nearest where I worked and bought all 6 copies they had on the shelf of his book and just passed them out. I was so excited for him. But I decided I had to get serious. So he had been serious and I had not. So now I'm going to be serious. So in my case, what I decided to do was to go get an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. That is not the way everyone has to go. It's a way to go. And what I got from my MFA program, which is at Roosevelt University here in Chicago, was audience and deadlines. That has sort of been the ongoing requirement for me to get work done, is to know that someone is expecting it and that I'm getting feedback and there's a date by which I need to. Apparently I'm very lazy. So that is what I got from my MFA program. And I began writing very seriously and getting some short stories published. Won a couple of little awards for short stories, all good stuff. And then one of my short stories got long, about 40 or 50 pages long, which is pretty long for a short story. And it could have been published in that way, but I took it into my workshop. And the way workshop works is you have maybe 15 people all sitting in a circle of sorts, and they've all read your story, and they're going to tell you how they see it and what they're confused by and that sort of thing. And then you get all their notes and you take it back and you decide which of their comments are going to help you and which ones you can ignore. But in the workshop, I got some great feedback, but it wasn't all perfect. But what I got back most was, I want more. I want more of this character and I want more of that character. And I want more background about this character and I want to know more about her job and how does she get there. And I just, they had just had a lot of more questions. And so I went to my teacher and I said, what am I supposed to do? This is a beast of 40 or 50 pages, this short story. They've only read half of it for this workshop. So maybe some of it is in the other half of the story, right? But I don't understand how I'm going to make this work. And she said, Lori, it's a novel. Just keep writing. That's why there's a potential here for all that more, but you just have to keep writing it. To me, it was done. It was a long short story. So I had to be told this was a novel. Okay. So I wrote it. I did. I finished my degree program. I wrote this full novel. And at the end of that, it was terrible. It was awful. I don't know how to write a novel. And so I had written one that I didn't know how to write. Went back to work, revised in my off hours. I spent a lot of time during my lunch hours at my new job, revising this monster of a book that I had somehow created out of that short story. And I revised it so much that I actually started to feel it come apart in my hands. It was a very tactile feel. I was just moving things around and maybe making things worse rather than better. So I didn't try to get it published. I just put it away in what we call the drawer. Now, I think this is probably back from when people had typewriters and would do like a whole, print the whole draft or type the whole draft. And then, there's a thing, you have to do something with it when you're going to put it away. So they put it in an actual drawer. This is actually a folder on my laptop called the drawer. And that's where it stayed for several years. But I didn't put it away and think, well, that was nice. Good thing I tried that. I'll just, go about my business. I decided I'm going to put this in my drawer and immediately start something new. Just start something new. Now, the thing that I started that was new became my first published book, The Black Hour. It immediately felt new and fresh. I hadn't been laboring over it for about 4 years, as I had by the time I put that old draft from my MFA program into the drawer. It just felt so good to be writing something new. And even though I didn't know how to write a novel when I wrote that first one, writing that first one taught me how to write a novel. So when I started writing The Black Hour, I just had a better sense of how a story should unfold. And I'm not going to say it was easy. If I ever say any of this was easy, I am lying. But it felt good. And I had taught myself quite a bit. So the Black Hour took me about 2.5 years to write and revise completely before I could do anything with it that was sort of business oriented, like getting an agent, which a literary agent is the person that's sort of between you, the author, and the publisher. They will sell the book to publishers. And if you want to be published by a big 5 company, and many of the publishers require that you have to be agented. So that was the first step. I finally have this manuscript that I think might be good enough. And so I sent it off to get an agent, did a ton of research. And if someone is really interested in that process, I can answer questions at the end. Put your questions in the chat and I will answer them. Absolutely can focus on anything you guys are interested in. But that it took about the research into what kind of agent I needed and who I might approach and how I approached them and getting all the pieces in place took so long, and I was ready for the long haul because I heard it would take a long time. In the end, what I did is I spent an extra year on the revisions. So that 2.5 years actually included a full year of just me revising with a couple of other readers, telling me what they saw, what they were confused by, or what they were bored by. So I had really put a lot of effort into that. So when I sent out my letters to get an agent for this book, it only took 3 weeks to get an agent. So that is not normal necessarily. It's not abnormal. It's just sort of different for everybody. But it was a little surprising that it went that quickly. And then my agent took that manuscript. We worked on a little bit, and then she went off to, I just went back to work and started writing a new book, and back to literal work because I had a day job. She sold it, and my first book was published in 2014. So that's all that preamble to get published. And then while that process is unfolding, it becomes the work of other people when it's, I've turned it in and they've bought it and they're going to publish it. All these people whose jobs are to proofread it and help me make it better and design the cover and to write the stuff on the, all the publicity. There are tons of people who are involved in it. I go back to writing. So because mystery, as it turns out that I am writing, is sort of a book a year kind of prospect. So, don't waste any time, get to writing. I do want to back a little bit because there's another story that I think that you might like. It's an Indiana story. Back when that short story, before it was a novel, I had just been told that short story might be a novel and I should keep writing. I got accepted into the Midwest Writer Workshop Fellowship. I wish they still did these. I would send you right to them if you were interested in writing. It was just a 2-day program at the one of the parks up north, and I can't remember the name of it. Oh, it's too bad because I love that place. I want to say Potawatomi, but that sounds like that may be the wrong place. It's north of Fort Wayne. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, put it in the chat. It was a park and we met there, and when I arrived, I was so excited to be there because this is back when I'm still in my MFA program. And this is like my first not school thing that I'm doing as a writer. I get to go to this place and I'm with, adults. I'm an adult, but you know what I mean? People who are much older than I am and people who have been writing their whole lives. And my old dean from Ball State was one of the people there. And I got to see Ed Kahn, if anyone knows Ed Kahn, Earl Kahn, and our new Earl Kahn, who has sadly passed away. And it just felt very good to be doing it. I'm doing it. So I was super excited, probably annoyingly so. And when I arrived, they had put me not in the fiction group and not in the nonfiction group, but in the mystery group. And I have to tell you, I was really kind of devastated because I didn't think that I had been placed in the right group. I really thought I came all this way over from Chicago and I was so excited. And now I'm watching the fiction group walk away and I should be with them. And what's happening here? Mystery. The person who was supposed to be teaching mystery had been ill, I think. And so Terrence Faraday, who's a writer, I hope you will look into, a fantastic crime writer in Indianapolis is where he lives. He had been sort of pulled in last minute. And so he had read, let's call it 10, 15 pages of 3 stories to help us. And he arrives in the morning and here we are. And the first thing he sees is me being like, Mr. Faraday, I think I might be in the wrong group. And he's like, oh, because this is like one of these like, mystery versus literary, genre versus literary thing that maybe doesn't doesn't happen at the reader level or even the library level or maybe even the bookseller level, but at the author level, it's a thing, right? So here I am already kind of saying, I don't respect mystery. I don't know what's going on here. But he set me straight in the nicest way. He thinks this story makes him sound mean, but he was not mean. He saved me so much time by cutting to the quick and saying, oh, you think you're in the wrong group. Okay. So I read your story last night to be here this morning. He's filling in last minute. And there's a crime in your first 10 pages. Are you going to solve it? And remember, this is a short story that I thought was a short story. And now it's a novel. And now I have to write many more pages to make that true. And I said, well, I don't know. It was a short story last week. Now it's a novel. Maybe. Yeah, probably. Sure. Yeah, I would probably solve that crime. I hadn't really thought about it, but now that you're saying it, yes, I would probably, yeah, I'm going to solve that crime. And he's like, great. If you solve it, that is a mystery. If you don't solve it, maybe it's something else. But if you are going to solve that crime that you start out your story with, it's possible that you're a crime writer. So just keep it in mind. So I found out I was a novelist, and now I found out I'm a crime novelist, and I just had to prove it. Elizabeth wants to know if they're allowed to ask questions. Absolutely. Type your questions into the chat. I can see the chat back here and would be happy to answer questions. If I know I'm going to answer it later, I might ignore you, but I would absolutely love to answer some questions. I'll forge ahead and you ask your questions. Okay, Elizabeth? So now here we are. I'm a crime novelist. I've got one sold. I'm going to be writing, and I'm writing my next book. So my first book took 2.5 years from the time I started it to the time I have an agent. Yes, Pokagon State Park. Thank you, Anne. That is exactly where we met. It was so nice. They have a house. It's a very nice house there, and we stayed in that what would you call that? Like a guest house, and we stayed there, and it was so nice. I would have stayed there much longer. It was just a two-day thing, but it was like a very nice retreat. And of course, great things happened for me there, finding out I was a crime solver. I don't sound like a crime solver, though, do I? I had to be told I was writing a novel, and I had to be told I was writing a mystery novel. So my characters are sharper than I am. Let's just put it that way. Okay, I will answer your question, Elizabeth, a little bit later on, I think. Pokagon State Park is exactly what I meant. Thank you, Anne. So I'm going to buzz through the rest of my career so we can get to the book I believe some of you have read for this week. So I don't want to ignore that, and I want to answer any questions you have about that. So I started my next book as soon as I sent the letters out to the agents and just kept writing. That book took 2 years. So 2.5 years, 2 years. And remember I said mystery is sort of a book a year. It's sort of, I think it's because of category mystery, the series books that we all love, has the same character, and they go through many adventures in each book. The readers of those are very, very ardent admirers of getting a new book every year. So that's, I think, where the book a year situation came from. I don't write a series. My books are all standalones, but I'm somehow being held to the standard of a book a year. So we'll see how that goes. So far, I had a couple glitches, but at the time when I'd sold first book, the second book is underway, and you're always kind of thinking, what's next? What's next? And to get a book a year, those 2 books were published 1 year apart, which is why I'm belaboring the point. So 2.5 years, 2 years, 1 year apart. So the math is not in my favor. So I decided that maybe the easiest thing, maybe the fastest thing that I could do to get a book out in the third year is to pull out the draft of that drawer book and see if I could fix it. It'll be faster, right? It was not, in fact, very fast at all. I had to rewrite it completely. But the thing that happened was that while I was working on this, and I got the chance to really dedicate myself to it because I left my day job around between those two books, was to really just intensely work on it and really live in that story, which was very hard, but also very satisfying to do. And I was at almost the very end of revising that drawer book, that short story that had become a novel, which had become a mystery novel, which had become something that I put away, when my agent got a call from HarperCollins and they wanted to know what I had available. So the drawer book became my first book with HarperCollins, and I got a 2-book deal from them. And that book is The Day I Died, which is the book I think that the Library Book Club has read for this week. So all that to tell you that that book, from the moment I started it as a short story in my MFA program to the moment it was on the shelf at Target, my Target, I bought it. I got the red basket and bought it there just to take the picture, really. You should buy your books from Nathan at Village Lights, but this book was available at Target, so I bought it there. 10 years from the time that short story started. It's sort of like the story of my career is the story of that book. And it takes place in part in Indiana. In fact, the first half of the book is basically my hometown, or one of the hometowns, Lebanon, Indiana. So if you're familiar with Lebanon, you might find some landmarks there that you recognize, including the county courthouse. In fact, a lot of my books have had Indiana settings. Little Pretty Things, my second book, is also entirely set in Indiana. Oh, The Lucky One. Okay, well, I'll get there in a second then. Sorry. I tell that story anyway, because I think it sort of tells you what my career has been like. I have relied on a lot of people to nudge me in the right direction. But, I also had to do the work. I had to write during my lunch hours when I had a job that was not easy at all. Evenings, weekends. I once went on a cruise with my husband and some friends, and I wrote, I think, about 10,000 words of the Black Hour on the cruise boat. So I know how to party. I am super fun for your cruise adventures. So that gets us up to HarperCollins gave me a 2-book deal. So the first book is the one that I had rewritten. And then the second one was a book called Under a Dark Sky, which when it sold was just a glimmer in my eye. I had no idea it was sold as Untitled number 4. All I knew was it was due a year, basically from the time I signed the contract. So the book I wrote the fastest is Under a Dark Sky, which is set at a dark sky park in Michigan. And then there comes a moment when you have to decide what you're going to write next. And I kind of had to walk around and watch TV and flip through magazines. And I'm doing that again right now. So the process it's a mystery. It really is. Just kind of looking for what's speaking to me. A novel is not a small undertaking, so it has to be something that you want to spend a good deal of time with for about a year, like a serious year where that's what you're working on, almost entirely all that you're working on. Ask my husband. Like the dishes don't get done, the laundry, forget it. It's very intense. But and then another year of publishing and going and talking to libraries and bookstores. So it's not a decision you want to make lightly. It's something you kind of want to have to spend some time with, or are willing to spend some time with, even if it's not sometimes a fun topic. For my next book, I actually got the idea from my neighbor. I live in Chicago and the houses are really close together, and we have a fence between our two houses. It's chain link, ugly. And this cute little family moved in, and the very first time I met her, she said, This is my little daughter, about a year and a half, Eden. And I sort of stumbled over myself to assure her that I hadn't named the character in my book that was coming out very soon, Eden, after her daughter. We were just meeting and just need to tell you that I have a book coming out. And she thought that was cool that I was writer, and that the character was Eden. Yay, she said. I'm like, oh, I don't think you're going to think so. Maybe. I mean, it depends. But, these are not necessarily, these are dark stories. And sometimes maybe you don't want your kid in a book about murder. But she was very cool with it. And then several weeks later, we were talking about the fence, over the ugly fence. We're meeting, talking, and we talked about how we both hated it. And I hated it because it's ugly. But she says, oh, no, I hate it because I'm worried someone's going to reach over and grab Eden. And I had not thought of that. I'm usually a worst case scenario type person, but, because of what I do, but I had not thought of that. And I said, oh, it's because I don't have kids. And she said, no, it's because I was kidnapped as a child. At which point I said, okay, stop. You just became the protagonist of my next book. Is that okay? And she was like, yay. And I'm like, I don't think you're going to think so, but I'll see what I do with it. So stories are everywhere, and I'm hoping that they crop up here pretty soon for the next one. I did sell the lucky one in a 2-book deal. So the second book in that deal is not yet published. It comes out October 12th, I think was the date. And it is Death at Greenway. Look at that beautiful cover. I'm so happy with this cover. Doesn't she look like she's got angel's wings or something? She's wearing, it's hard to see, but she's wearing a nurse's cap and a long cloak, sort of nursey looking. This is actually my first period novel. It's set in 1941, World War II. It's based in part on a true story. I was reading a book called Agatha Christie's Secret Notebooks for fun, as you do. It is simultaneously the most interesting and most boring book I have ever encountered. It's really good bedside reading for a mystery writer, probably a mystery reader too, because you're so caught up in it and so inspired by her work. And then it's time to go to bed. But in there's like a half sentence that talks about how, almost like we all already knew this, that during World War II, when they were evacuating children out of the Blitz in London and other major cities, 10 children were moved to Agatha Christie's summer estate, Greenway House, which is not a thing that I knew. And reading that, I sat up in bed and I thought, I have to read that book. Of course, there's going to be a book. There has to be a book. I'll find it. I'm so into, it's sort of like Narnia at Agatha Christie's house, or Bedknobs and Broomsticks, which is one of my favorites, at Agatha Christie's house. And I was so excited to read that book, but then I realized it didn't exist. No one had ever written it, which put a lot of pressure on me because I am not English. I love England. I have a friend who lives there. I've been several times, but I am not a historian. I have been writing contemporary novels up until this point. But HarperCollins bought The Lucky One, which was written, and this one, which was not written, and gave me the chance to work on it and make it my front burner project at last. I discovered that little line of text in the John Curran book in 2011, and it's being published this fall. So that is the kind of timelines we're talking about. Now, we had a couple of questions, and I do want to talk a little bit more about Lucky One, since that was the book that you guys, okay. So Elizabeth wants to know what if you are writing and don't have the money to publish and so on? Okay. That is a good question. The money to publish part is a little bit problematic because that you shouldn't have to pay to publish. Not necessarily. You can what they call indie publish, self-publish, and that does cost money if that's the way you want to go. If you have a story that you think has a broad audience that might be picked up in libraries and bookstores, I would encourage you to work on the writing and work toward getting an agent if it's that kind of book. If you think it's maybe a small press kind of book, you don't need an agent necessarily. So you could start doing some research on where you think the book might be published. But if you're going to publish with a traditional publisher instead of indie publishing it, you don't pay; they pay you. Or they do when you sell books. It depends on whether they do an advance or not. An advance is the money that you get up front against earnings on a book. But some small publishers will not do advances. They'll just in the contract they give you royalties for every book sold. So yeah, you get paid. And they also take care of the cover and the distribution and making sure that the book shows up at Village Lights and in the bookstore and the library. Marketing and all the things that goes into it's a big industry. It's a big job. If you do indie publishing, and I know people have had success, so that is an option that's open to you. But it does cost money up front because you are the one who has to find, someone to help you if you need proofreading, if you need editing, if you can't design your own cover, when you go to print the books yourself, some of that will require you to put some money up front. But again, traditionally published books, they pay you. How would you find an agent? So I am going to find an article that I wrote for, hope I don't lose you guys while I'm doing this. I wrote an article for Writer's Digest about getting, I might just have posted it twice, possibly. There we go. That's a link to an article, 11 Steps to Finding the Agent Who Will Love Your Book. And that has sort of a step-by-step process, including some of the advice I have about how to proceed, how to work on your book. Again, if you work on the book, it's basically just make it as so good that they can't turn you down. And then you start to find an agent. How has the pandemic affected your writing process? Oh, Judy. I'm going to show that comment because I think we all need to be real here. I am having a tough time with the pandemic. I think we all are. I think it's safe to say we probably all are. I was promoting The Lucky One. The Lucky One came out about a month before lockdown. Not even a month before. So I got a chance to have a couple of events, I think about 10 events. And then I had to go home and shut down the works. I'd had like 3 or 4 months worth of stuff planned. And so I had to go back, and some of it was canceled on me, and then I had to cancel the stuff I had set up. And it was sad. It was very sad to have put all that work into building the process, which bookstores and which libraries and where do I travel and who do I get to see and where do I stay, and then have to break it all down again. So that was one layer of difficulty. And then, but because I was stuck at home, I was able to go back to my project, Death at Greenway, and rewrite it. And I don't know if I would have had the chance to dig in with that project as much as I did if the pandemic had not forced me to stay home. So it's an odd thing to be sort of grateful, but also really angry about the same thing. So what I did is I hid in that project. I took it down to the studs. I rewrote it entirely. It used to have 2 timelines. I stripped out a timeline and I rebuilt it and rewrote it. Kind of rewrote it twice, actually, until I was happy with it. And so that's what I did with my early pandemic. And then when I was done and sent it off to my editor, I had to get the puzzles out and watch Great British Baking Show and do all the coping things that you guys had all been already doing. I had been hiding in my novel rewrite for 2 months, 3 months. And then I got a puppy, and that took care of any extra time I had until now. She's 10 months old and kind of a monster. The monster I deserve, I think, probably. And what I'm dealing with now is that I'm sort of in between books, right? So now I have to figure out what I want to write next. And again, it's something I want to spend the next year of my life with. So it's not a small decision, and I just haven't found it yet. So if any of y'all have the best idea ever, send them to me. Send them to me. If your other questions, put those in the chat. I would be happy to talk about that. Let me tell you a little bit about the lucky one. So that's the one that the book club actually read. I'm sorry that I got that wrong. You would be surprised. My 6th book is the one that's coming out this fall, and you would think 6 books. She can keep track of 6 books, right? No. I have started losing track of the names of characters and some of the details, some of the stories that I like to tell people about how the book came together. So I started keeping notes so that I could be a little bit clearer. Of course, I read the notes for the wrong book. But so this is what the pandemic is doing to Lori's brain. I call it my 2-minute brain. I've got about 2 minutes worth of attention before things start to spiral out of control. But the lucky one is the book that came about because of my neighbor, over the fence saying, "Oh, I know I hate this fence because it's too low. I'm worried that someone's going to take my kid." And I don't often get handed stories quite that literally across a fence, but there's a feeling I get when there's something that has some legs. There's a little something, I don't know where I'm going to use it, how I'm going to use it, but it's too good to let it go. And as soon as my neighbor said I was kidnapped as a child, I'm like, I need to explore the concept of someone who was kidnapped as a child and having that story to tell, and being like the most normal, sweet human being ever, raising two little girls now, because she's had another one since, holding down a great, big job, all these things, very normal person, but she's got this really interesting backstory that I wanted to explore. And then I had also been spending a little time on a website called the Doe Network. I don't advise you to spend as much time there as I did, because it's not fun times. It's well, if you've read the book, you know what it is. But it's a website where real amateur sleuths volunteer their time to try to match unidentified remains with cold case missing persons. And often, those are the same people. And they're trying to keep the database as full as possible so that when remains are found, they can make an immediate match. But it's not very easy because there aren't that many clues that can link them together. So it's quite a process. And I had been spending a little time there trying to figure out what I wanted. This website was speaking to me. These amateur sleuths were speaking to me, but I didn't know how I was going to use it yet. And then one day I was you can sort of sort the database by region, and you can sort it by age. So if you do it by age, the very earliest missing person who will show up is a lawyer who worked with Billy the Kid. His body was never found. His obviously he is dead now, but when they find his bones someday, he's in this database waiting to be matched. But I was sorting it by region, Indiana, because that's where I'm from. And I went to, I think, the 1980s, I was kind of scrolling through, looking at the changes in haircuts and fashions and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden I saw a face that I recognized. And it was the face of a little girl who had gone missing from my neighborhood when I was a child. When I was 8 and she was 12, she went missing. And if you remember anything about childhood, 8 years old, 12 years old, we wouldn't have been friends. We shouldn't have been friends, except that we had definitely been riding the school bus together for a while. And at least once we sat next to each other, which makes me think that maybe she was ostracized from the back of the bus. That's, from where the older kids sat. She was sitting in the front with me. Something was going on with her. And what we know now is a lot of things were going on with her. She went missing when she was 12, and she was considered a runaway. For this book, I went back and did research on her to see what was reported what was not reported. And it was hard to realize that nothing had been reported. She was a runaway, and they didn't even put out, there was no Amber Alert. There was no, be on the lookout. There's nothing about her at all that I could find. This story is even worse because 2 years after she disappeared, the body of a young woman was found between where I lived and where my grandparents lived. And in fact, my grandfather was one of the first people on the scene. It was sort of a family story that I sort of always remembered and didn't quite have the details about a young woman who had been raped and then shot in the back. But it was not the body of the girl that I knew, Deborah Jean Cole. It was the body of her sister, Frances Annette Cole. And fast forward a little bit, what the girls had was a stepfather problem. In a few years, their stepfather died of cancer, rather young. No, not cancer, heart trouble, really young, as though he might have been worried about something. And they finally were able to compel DNA from him. And then it took a while for DNA to catch up so that they could actually do it. And it was confirmed that he was actually the person who had assaulted Frances. And we assume maybe had something to do with Deborah Jean's disappearance as well. But her body has never been found. Back when we were on the school bus, the thing I remember about her is that she was very interested in the fact that my birthday was coming up that weekend. I don't know. I must have said it on my birthday and I'm having a party and with my cousins. And we made a list. And she was very interested in like what colors and what I needed for this party, streamers, and they're going to be pink and green. I needed pink and green. She was very bossy, and I remember being a little put off by that. And then Monday came around and she's like, did you? And I'm like, no, it was just my cousins, it wasn't like that kind of party. So for the release of The Lucky One, which is dedicated in part to Deborah Jean, Jeannie, and Frances Annette Cole, I put pink and green streamers up at all my launch parties. So the thing that I found out later, realized when I was doing all this research, is that her birthday and mine were nearly the same day. So it was not my party that we were planning. It was hers. And she did not get probably those pink and green streamers and probably had a very hard life at home from what we can assume. It is sad. I know. I'm sorry I brought the room down. I can tell you some fun stories about The Lucky One is that, the title is mine. You don't always get to, you usually call your book something while you're writing it, but I've learned not to get attached if I can help it. Actually, what I was trying to do was to make sure that the title that I wanted was so tightly woven into the story that it could not be changed. And it worked for The Lucky One. They didn't even want me to think of another title. And previous books, I've actually had to make lists and lists and lists of titles that could work for the same story. So, but the cover, I've loved all my covers eventually. They haven't always started out first draft exactly what I had in mind. I don't get to design the cover, and you wouldn't want me to design the cover. There are people who know more about this than I do. But I have opinions, and that's where I'm dangerous. That's where Ball State has prepared me to be dangerous in publishing, to know about graphic design. For this one, the first option they sent was a much younger girl. So I thought I've given them so much to work with. I gave them, migraines that look like black birds flying at her face. I gave you so much. So we compromised, and then I sent them a picture that I was thinking something more like this, and they sent me back a photo of the woman you see on the cover of that book. Who's much more age appropriate for Eden, from Alice. See, I'm doing it. I'm mixing up the names. Alice. And there's also the movement of her hair, which I liked a great deal. So that is news from The Lucky One. Did we have the people who read the book? Did they have any questions about the book? Oh, Rebecca wants to know. Let's see. Let's show this one. For those who haven't read your books before, which one would you recommend they start with? This is a trick question, Rebecca, because they're standalones, so it doesn't matter. You can go, whichever one the library has in, or whichever one that Nathan has in stock at Village Lights, is okay. But what I usually ask is, what kind of story do you like? Because some of them are a little bit more traditional mystery, and some of them are a little bit more on psychological suspense into things. But they're all about women who are mostly women who are, the ordinary people who have gone through extraordinary things or have to face extraordinary things. And I love an ending that has some hope to it. So it's really up to you. Like, what do you like to read? If you're looking for a Nancy Drew traditional mystery, my second book, The Little Pretty Things, is probably the most traditional mystery. Little Pretty Things or Under a Dark Sky. And then the others are more psychological suspense than that. So I was reading Elizabeth's comment. You watch the ID channel. Yes. I don't have that channel, but I love a British mystery show. Don't you? I like the detective shows. My favorite show is Vera. If you haven't seen Vera and you like police procedural stories, get yourself some Vera. I believe it's either BritBox or Acorn. You can see those, and they're so good. They're very atmospheric, which is something I like. But I don't think I have the ID channel. I did listen to some true crime podcasts while I was writing that book. Got a little bit into My Favorite Murder, which is true crime and then comedy. But they produce it so fast, and I don't have a lot of time for listening to podcasts. If my dog would just behave herself on the walk so I could do something else, maybe. But were there other questions about any writing, publishing, agent getting, the lucky one? Is anyone mad at me about anything in the lucky one? I can take it. Let me see. Can I tell you a little bit about Death at Greenway while I've got a chance? You can go ahead and put your questions in the thing, and I'll go back and get anything that I've missed. I mean, this is early because this isn't coming out until October, but this has been another, as I said earlier, long process. So I had the idea for this book in 2011, and finally it became my front burner project 2 years ago. Started doing the research for it. Let me tell you just briefly, again, in case somebody has come in, since it's based on the true story of in World War II when they moved about 3 million people, mostly children, out of London, out of the major cities, evacuated them away from the Blitz or from the bombings that they expected. They didn't start right away. And 10 of these children were moved to Agatha Christie's holiday home, Greenway House in Devon, in South Devon, near Dartmouth. And the research for this was, I have to start talking about this book without making this face. I am not a research person. I had to overcome some of my natural tendencies, but it ended up being really interesting to research the real situation, knowing that as soon as I ran out of fact, I could start writing fiction. But the problem was, because no one had ever researched it before, I just kept finding new fact. Because I was finally digging, someone's digging and looking for this information. I was able to find new information that even the estate of Agatha Christie did not have. So I've been able to give them information that they didn't have in their records, including who the real people were who were in this group. So it was a couple and two hospital nurses is what Agatha Christie says in her autobiography, who took these children down to Greenway. And I don't know how long they stayed. I wasn't able to get the particulars there, but probably less than a year and a half, but maybe up to a year and a half. They were there in the house, and there were 10 children under the age of 5. At which point I thought, I can't write this story. 10 children under the age of 5. Who wants to read a murder mystery with them running around the house? It made it very difficult, because I had sort of imagined, a bread knobs and broomsticks at Agatha Christie's house situation, or one of my favorite movies is The Goonies. So, kids having adventures, that's what I had imagined. And then when I found out they were all under the age of 5, I thought that's not what I wouldn't give for 5 children age 10. But that's not what history gave me. So, and many people had said at that point when I was struggling with this, why don't you just write them as 5 children, age 10? Nobody cares. I'm like, I care, because very little about this episode had been written about. So if I was going to be the first one to try it, why would I? I mean, there's just not that much fact. So I want to use the fact that I have. So all the fact that I can find, I'm going to use. And then after that, I'll start writing fiction. And then, of course, kept finding new. So the 2 hospital nurses are the characters who get into a lot of trouble. They were the right age, and no one knows a thing about them. They were real people, but they are otherwise lost to history. So they get into a lot of trouble, and the kids are there, but they're all safe. They're all fine. I'm not going to kill any kids in Death at Greenway, I promise you. So that's out in October. And the fun part of the research is that I got to go and stay at Greenway. I had been once before with my friend who lives in Bristol. I went to visit her and go to a conference, and she drove me down, and we just went as tourists. We just went in the house and walked around and took our pictures. And then I asked, my friend actually asked a docent, like, is there anything in the house about the kids who stayed here during World War II? And she pointed out this one little printed booklet that had a picture of one little girl who had always known she was one of the children staying at Agatha Christie's house during World War II, and had come back later as an adult, written a letter to Greenway and come back and visited Greenway, and left, this little picture of herself as a 6-year-old once she was back with her family. And they had put it in this little booklet so that people visiting could take a look. So that was it. And then one of the docents there that day said, oh, but then there's also the cupboard. And I'm like, I need to see that cupboard. So they took me upstairs to the room across from Agatha Christie's bedroom, which was locked. It's not open to the public. Opened the door, and there's a cabinet. And when you open the cabinet doors, there are little cubbies, and they're labeled, and they're still labeled all these years later with the little girls' names. So I had the 5 little girls' names fact from the cubbies. And when I saw those cubbies, it was over. I mean, if I was ever going to abandon this project, it was over. I couldn't abandon it once I had seen the cupboard. So much later on, I was able to, through Sophie Hannah, who's a friend of mine, who writes the continuation of the Poirot novels for the estate of Agatha Christie. She, I got to tell her about my story, and she said, I'm going to put you in touch with Belinda, who works for the National Trust, who now owns Greenway House, and who set me up to stay in the house. My husband and I stayed there 3 nights. And you can actually rent out the top floor, what they would call the second floor, what we would call the third floor, through the National Trust. You can rent one of the apartments, but it's hard to get in there because it's, it's a popular vacation resort little area, secluded, but lots to do down there. But they have this one room that it's really just a 1-person room. They call it the bedsit, and that should have been my first clue that I'm not sure there was enough room for 2, but my husband went with me, and because I love him dearly, it was enough room for the 2 of us to stay. And at 5:30, when all the employees left, when all the tourists left, it got quiet, and my husband and I got to sit on the hill and have a drink. And I was Agatha and he was Max. And it was the best research trip. It gave me such a sense of the place and the house. And of course, I wanted to do right by Agatha Christie because I love Agatha Christie. Okay, so we got a couple questions while I was rattling on about my new book, and I don't want to keep you forever because I think you probably have things to do. Okay. In the lucky one, were the locations based on real towns? Well, that is a great question, and let me think. Let my brain catch up. Yes, they are Chicagoland area mostly. The book is set in Chicago and the suburbs, and maybe the further out places, the exurbs, I think they're called. And then they go to Milwaukee in one scene, and then they go to Indiana. Again, Indiana being so close, and also just features in most of my stories because I know it a little bit better. The Indiana towns are not necessarily based on real towns. I have used my hometown, Thorntown, before. It shows up in the Black Hour. I've used Lebanon, Indiana, the place I lived until I was about 12. That features in Little Pretty Things and The Day I Died, both. A town that I've gone on summer vacations to up in Wisconsin called Eagle River features very heavily in The Day I Died. Under a Dark Sky is based on a dark sky park, an actual dark sky park in northern Michigan called the Headlands International Dark Sky Park, and that is Mackinac City, so a real place. For the lucky one, the places in Indiana, I just sort of did a more in general. But my dad's house is out in the country between Crawfordsville and Colfax. And if you're at all aware of how small Colfax is, you might get a sense of how I'm able to sort of write a general small town in Indiana. It's probably mostly based on Colfax, maybe even smaller than that, though. That's a good question. Thank you. Elizabeth says she's not mad at me. Okay. Good. Just wish I had the stamina you do to write. I have a few written up, but not fully finished. I live on Social Security disability and have a son in school, so going through the movements to get them done slowly. Joe Kenda on the ID channel. Yeah, he's great. Well, I mean, Elizabeth, you just told me you're watching Joe Kenda on the ID channel. Turn Joe off for half an hour and write. That's all. I mean, sitting in the chair and writing, it is the worst advice, but it's also the only thing that's absolutely true. If you don't do the writing, and not just get it done once, but you have to have the stamina to write it again. And again, maybe if it needs it, right? So keep going, Elizabeth. Keep writing. You don't have to put any money into this. You have to put time into this. That's what's more important. Well, Anne is saying thank you. So I think that I have fulfilled my time, perhaps, maybe even gone over, but hopefully I'm not keeping anybody from dinner. Hopefully you're eating dinner and just watching me prattle on. If you have other questions about writing, you can find me at www.loriraderday, no hyphen in that one.com. And I have a contact page. So you can go to the contact page and send me your questions. And more finding who wants them, I guess. Okay, well, that's the agent part. Yeah, and finding books that you love. If you find books that you love and you can figure out how they were published and maybe who those agents were, that might be a place to start. Elizabeth, if you want to look at agents, you can do research at querytracker.net. Querytracker.net. That's a place to research agents and find maybe some keywords for what you're writing and what you think, how to describe your book. Okay. Again, LoriRaderDay.com. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Like, comment, yell at me, whatever you got. Thank you so much for reading The Lucky One. Thank you so much to Indiana Humanities. Thank you to Village Lights and Nathan. for handling the book sales. And thank you, of course, to the Jefferson County Public Library for putting in for an Indiana Humanities Grant and choosing me. I would love to get down to Madison and Hanover in person someday, and maybe talk at the library in person this when nature lets us do that. Okay. Thank you so much. Keep reading. Keep writing, Elizabeth. Bye, everybody.